The hallway outside my door was quiet, too quiet. I kept glancing toward the sliver of light underneath it, waiting for a shadow. Just one sign that someone might be walking this way. The walls felt hollow, like they were listening too. A cart. Clattered down the corridor earlier, but it didn't stop here. I thought maybe they were just late. I shifted in my chair near the window. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of afternoon that makes you forget what time it is. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate, brushing against the glass and disappearing like it had better places to be. I listened to the clock ticking above the door. Each second felt louder, as if it were announcing something no one else was brave enough to say. I folded my hands in my lap and waited anyway. That kind of hope doesn't leave you all at once. It tiptoes out slowly, like it's sorry to go. I leaned forward when I heard footsteps, but they passed by. No knock, no hello, just silence, soft and final. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't waiting for a party. I was just hoping someone remembered I was still here. The nurse came in an hour later with a cake I didn't ask for. "Happy birthday, Elaine," she said, too cheerful, setting it down on my tray like a tray of pudding. I looked at the name on the icing. Elaine. Not Eileen. I didn't correct her. It was a simple sheet cake, the kind you pick up at the last minute. The pink frosting already looked tired, and the edges had begun to crust. She smiled and told me she'd come back later to check on me. I nodded. When she left, I just stared at it. The smell of artificial vanilla hung in the air like a memory trying too hard. Sugar can't fill a room, and frosting can't fix a silence that thickens every year. I didn't take a bite. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I kept glancing at the phone. It sat there on the side table like it had something to say. I remembered the sound it used to make when my son called. Loud, clunky, and joyful. But today, it didn't ring. Not once. I tried to distract myself with a magazine, but my eyes kept drifting back. Every few minutes, I checked to make sure the ringer was on. It was. The room felt heavier as the hours passed. The radiator gave a low hum, the kind that filled the silence but didn't comfort it. The clock hands moved. The phone didn't. I reached out once, just to touch it. My fingers grazed the receiver, then pulled back. I didn't want to beg a sound from it, but I wanted one. I caught my reflection as I passed the mirror above the dresser. I stopped. Not because I wanted to admire myself, but because I wasn't sure who I was looking at. My cheeks had fallen softer, my eyes smaller, tired. The skin around them told stories I didn't remember choosing. There was something almost shy about the woman in the mirror, like she didn't want to be seen. I remembered when I used to fix my hair before my birthday dinner, smoothing it down with a little spritz of lilac perfume. I could still smell it, faintly, clinging to the corner of the vanity drawer. There was a time when that reflection lit up with laughter. Now it just waited for the day to pass. I turned away. The candle was already sitting on the tray beside the cake. Just one, thin, pale yellow. I picked it up, set it gently in the middle of the cake, and struck a match. It flared to life, warm and soft. The room changed, just a little. The light shifted. Shadows stretched across the walls like long, quiet sighs. I stared at the flame and waited for a feeling I couldn't name. I didn't sing. I didn't make a wish out loud. Just close my eyes. I didn't wish for anything big, not this year. Just that maybe, next time, someone might remember. And if they didn't, maybe I'd still remember myself. The flame danced like it heard me. I let it burn until the wick was nearly gone. Then with a soft breath, I sent it out into the stillness. The cardigan I wore today was old but soft, blue with a loose thread near the sleeve. I folded the arms one over the other, slow and careful, like it had been a gift, even If it wasn't, I imagined someone handing it to me, smiling. "Happy birthday, Mama," they'd say, and I'd pretend to be surprised. Sometimes pretending is softer than the truth. I smoothed the fabric between my hands. It smelled faintly of fabric softener, lavender, and something else I couldn't. Quite place, familiar, safe. I placed it into the drawer as if I were storing a memory. I closed it gently. There were no gifts this year. But tonight, this felt close enough. The kitchen sang that day, not with music from the radio, though the record player crackled with some old swing tune, but with life itself. Spoons clattered against glass bowls, the oven clicked warm in the background, and my husband's voice carried through the air, hopelessly off-key and joyfully loud. He twirled our daughter right there on the linoleum floor, her little socks, sliding, curls bouncing, both of them laughing like the world belonged only to them. I stood at the counter, stirring cocoa into melted butter, the smell wrapping around me like a memory being made in real time. The sunlight poured through those checkered curtains just right, golden, soft, almost holy. My apron was dusted with flour, and my heart felt fuller than the bowl in my hands. That kitchen wasn't fancy. The floor tiles were chipped, and the drawers stuck when you pulled too hard. But we didn't notice. We lived in that room. We celebrated, healed, and held each other there, with cake, music, and burnt toast on Sundays. Now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that song. And for a moment, just a moment, I'm standing there again, with chocolate on my hands and love in the air. She was supposed to wait, but of course she didn't. My daughter reached up and stuck her little fingers right into the frosting bowl, elbows, on the counter, eyes wide with mischief. I pretended to scold her, but I didn't mean it, not even a little. Her giggle made my chest feel warm, like cocoa on a cold day. I handed her a balloon and tied it around her wrist, watching her spin like it was her first dance. The frosting smudged across her cheek, and she didn't even notice. There was something about the mess that felt perfect back then. The cake didn't have to be perfect. The kitchen didn't need to be clean. Love was there, in the sticky fingertips, the laughter, the tiny fingerprints on the cabinet doors. Sometimes I wonder when mess stops feeling like joy, when it started feeling like failure instead. I miss those smudges. I miss that version of me. He had one sock on, one sock off, and he didn't care. He grabbed a spatula like it was a microphone and belted out the chorus of a song I can't even remember now. He wasn't in tune, and he didn't try to be. He danced like no one had ever broken his heart, and like nothing ever could. Our daughter laughed so hard she dropped her spoon. He scooped her up and twirled her again, feet barely touching the floor. I leaned against the counter, wiping my hands on my apron. The light in the room had shifted, more amber than gold now. The record skipped slightly, but even that was perfect. I didn't join them. I just watched. My heart swelled in that moment, full of things I couldn't put into words, gratitude, safety, joy so pure it almost hurt. That kind of dancing doesn't happen in nursing homes. It belongs in kitchens with chipped tile and burnt edges on the brownies. Before every birthday cake, I said a little prayer, not out loud, just something soft in my mind as I stirred the batter. Let this day be sweet. It was never just about the cake. It was about what it represented. Celebration, care, hope. The bowl always felt special in my hands. Smooth, cool ceramic, full of possibility. I'd scrape the sides carefully, fold in the flour with patience, making sure every bite would carry something good. The smell of cinnamon would rise into the air, mingling with the sunlight and the sound of someone humming down the hall. It wasn't just baking, it was a ritual, a quiet kind of offering. Haven't prayed like that in years. Not over batter, not over anything, really. I think somewhere along the line, I forgot how. That red checkered apron, it hangs in my mind like it's still waiting for me. tied tight at the waist, smudged with chocolate and memories. I used to wear it almost every day, even when I wasn't baking. It made me feel useful, grounded. Now I wear gowns with Velcro, soft slippers that don't click on the floor. Clothes that were chosen for comfort, not for purpose. No one needs me to measure flour or watch the oven anymore. No one asks me how long to let the dough rise, and yet, sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel that apron's knot pressing against my back. I can still smell vanilla and sugar clinging to the fabric. It reminds me I once knew how to make things from scratch. I once knew how to make people smile with nothing more than what was already in the pantry. I used to be the one writing the lists. The grocery runs, the school bake sales, the birthdays and anniversaries marked with little hearts in pen. Now, I'm the name on someone else's chart. A clipboard clipped to the end of my bed. Checked in at noon. Blood pressure at 2. Meds. At 4. I don't say this with bitterness, just quiet confusion. It all changed so gradually. One day, I was piping roses onto a cake, and the next, I was watching someone else decide what time I'd eat mashed potatoes. There's no frosting here, no handwritten recipes taped to the fridge, just paperwork, pill bottles, and reminders to push the call button if I need help. No one noticed the in-between, not even me. It's strange how easily a life full of love and flour can slip into something that smells more like disinfectant than dessert. The screen lit up softly in the dim room, numbers glowing back at me like they were waiting too. I stared at them for what felt like a long time, my finger just hovering. I told myself it was just a check-in, nothing more. But deep down, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to hear, "Happy birthday, Mama." It wasn't about gifts or long conversations. Just that one line, just something to remind me I still held a place in his day. The bedside lamp cast a sleepy amber light across the room. I could hear a soft rustling, maybe a nurse changing linens down the hall, maybe another resident shifting in their sleep. The air smelled faintly metallic, like warmed-up radiator coils. I pressed the call button. The line began to ring. It rang once, then twice, then again. Each ring stretched out longer, like time was trying to pull something from me. I waited, holding, my breath between each one. The silence on the other end felt too familiar, like an old coat I never meant to wear again. And then, the beep. I tried to speak, but my voice caught. I cleared my throat and pushed through it. "Hey, it's me. Just calling to say hi. I hope you're doing all right. I'm okay. Just wanted to hear your voice." I hung up after that. The key room was too quiet again. The outlet near the wall hummed faintly. It had never sounded that loud before. I opened the drawer beside the bed and reached in slowly, like the quiet might break. The blue cardigan was still there, just as I'd left it, folded neatly, still wrapped in the lavender tissue paper it came in. He'd given it to me 3 years ago. For Mother's Day, I think. Or maybe it was my birthday then, too. The tag was still attached. He never asked if I'd worn it. I lifted it out gently. The fabric was soft, cool to the touch. I pressed it to my face and closed my eyes. The lavender scent was still there, faded but warm. It reminded me of being needed, of days when he'd call just to ask how long to cook the roast. I didn't wear it tonight either. I just held it, like maybe it could hold me back. The drawer creaked a little when I closed it again. That last Christmas was the one that changed everything. We were sitting around the table, plates half full, the room tense without saying so. I told him I felt forgotten. That they left me out of things more and more, that the silence hurt. He looked up, annoyed. "You're just being sensitive, Mom," he said. "Don't make everything about you." That sentence settled like frost in the space between us. I didn't say much after that. Funny thing about silence, it grows roots. It stretches into birthdays, phone calls, holidays. It replaces the words you never thought you'd miss. And here I am, still remembering every word of that fight, but not the pie I baked or the music that played, just the ache. I lay back slowly, the bed colder than I expected. The ceiling fan above spun softly, humming a tune with no melody. Somewhere down the hall, I heard the creak of a wheelchair and a nurse coughing. Familiar sounds now, ones I barely noticed anymore. But inside me, everything was loud, the things I didn't say, the questions I still wanted to ask, the goodbyes we never said because we pretended we didn't need them. Sometimes, you don't realize a moment is your last reel, one with someone until long after it's passed. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to cry. The clock ticked beside me, each second a little sharper than the last. There was nowhere left to hide. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't light a candle or close my eyes dramatically. I just whispered it inside my chest. A birthday wish without a voice. I wish to feel remembered, that's all. Not flowers or visits or songs, just the feeling that I still lived inside someone else's thoughts. I imagined what it would have been like, him calling, laughing. How does it feel to be 81, Mama? I'd laugh back and say, same as 80, just with more creaks. But there was no call. The room was still. The moonlight cast silver stripes across the floor through the blinds. It made the shadows look soft, like the room was holding me. I folded my hands over my stomach and let out a quiet breath. I knew better than to expect anything. But still, I wished. The phone rang just after breakfast. Hey, Mama, my daughter said, her voice bright, too bright. Just wanted to check in before things get busy around here. I smiled into the receiver, even though she couldn't see it. Big crowd today, I asked. Oh yes, she said quickly. The kids brought friends, and Dave's sister came last minute with her boys. The house is bursting. I waited. She cleared her throat. So, we were thinking, maybe you could skip this year. Just rest, you know? It's a madhouse here. Said, of course, honey. I could use a quiet day anyway. She seemed relieved. I knew you'd understand. We said our goodbyes. When I hung up, the silence folded over me like a heavy quilt. It wasn't that she didn't love me. I know she does. But love shouldn't forget to set a place at the table. I pictured the table the way it used to be. We had a long wooden one that scratched easily. My spot was always near the window. I liked being close to the light. I could see the leaves outside turning, orange and gold, while laughter bounced off the walls. Now I imagined that table again, only full without me. A chair pulled away, never pulled back in. Plates passed without my hands reaching out. A story, told that I would have laughed at if only I had been there to hear it. I wasn't angry, just absent. Not everyone notices when something's missing. Sometimes being left out isn't loud. It's quiet. It's just not being remembered in the first place. Lunch here was early. They served boxed stuffing and mashed potatoes from a plastic container. The nurse placed my tray down gently and smiled. Happy Thanksgiving, Ms. Eileen. I nodded, then stared at the food. The stuffing had cooled by the time I picked up my fork. It was salty and soft, but it filled the room with nothing. I watched the old Thanksgiving Day parade on the television. The colors were bright, the music cheerful, but none of it reached me. There were voices in the hallway, other residents chatting, nurses walking past, but I heard none of it. Just the scrape of my fork against the tray. Just the sound of a day passing by. The parade on the TV screen played on like it always had. Giant balloons floated between buildings I'd never see again. Marching bands played songs I didn't recognize. The announcers kept their cheerful banter going like it was all still magic. But I wasn't in it. I wasn't even near it. I stared at the screen, and it felt like looking through a window into a world that no longer had space for me. I remembered when we used to watch it together. Me and the kids, curled up on the couch in fuzzy socks with mugs of hot chocolate in our hands. Now, it was just me and the flickering screen. The cheerfulness felt far away, like someone else's memory that I was borrowing for the afternoon. She came in during her break, the night nurse, Janie, or Janine maybe. Her English wasn't perfect, and my hearing wasn't either. But she sat, down across from me with half a sandwich and a peppermint in her hand. She didn't say much, just looked at the TV and nodded. Then she slid the peppermint across the table to me. I smiled, took it, and tucked it into my cardigan pocket like it was the best gift I'd gotten all day. We sat like that for a while. No forced conversation, no awkward silence either. Sometimes, kindness doesn't need words. Sometimes, presence is the only thing that keeps a day from disappearing completely. My daughter called again that evening, just before dinner. "Hey, Mama," she said. "Did you get some rest today?" "Oh, yes," I lied gently. The day flew by. I even watched the parade. "That's great," she said. "I knew you'd enjoy the quiet." I didn't tell her about the boxed stuffing or the flickering TV or the peppermint tucked in my pocket. I didn't tell her how I cried just once in the bathroom when no one was looking. I just said, "It was lovely, honey. I hope the turkey turns out." She laughed and said it had, and then she had to go. The kids were calling. Something spilled. "Chaos," she said, like it was a badge of honor. I hung up, and for the first time all day, the room felt warm. Not because of the radiator, but because I had made it through, without bitterness, without breaking. Because sometimes, telling them it was a good day is part of loving them too. I didn't expect anyone that night. Not after the day I'd had. Not after the phone calls that didn't come and the stuffing I barely touched. I turned the television off hours ago. The room had settled into silence like a familiar old shawl, heavy, warm, and too easy to disappear under. Then there was a soft knock. It wasn't loud or rushed, just thoughtful. The kind of knock that waits to be invited in. I called out, "Yes?" and the door creaked open. It was the night nurse, Janine, I think. She peeked in gently, holding a foil-wrapped bundle in one hand and a bottle of ginger ale in the other. Her smile was tired but kind, and she stepped inside like she didn't want to take up too much space. "I have sandwich," she said softly, nodding toward my little table. "You eat?" I shook my head. "Not really hungry," I whispered, even though my stomach had been grumbling since sundown. She sat anyway. She placed the sandwich on a napkin and pushed it toward me. "Tuna melt," she said. "Too much mayo, but warm." It smelled like something homemade, simple, real, comforting. My hands reached for it before my pride could stop them. I took a bite, careful not to spill, and the warmth spread through my chest faster than the sandwich itself. We didn't talk for a while. She looked at her phone once, then tucked it into her scrub pocket and leaned back in the chair like she had nowhere else to be. I said, "You didn't have to do this." She just shrugged. "My grandma, she likes tuna melt too." Her voice was soft, slightly broken in places, but it made something in me feel stitched up. "I think she would have liked you," she added after a pause. I smiled. It was the first time I had all day. The television screen glowed faintly across the room, just enough light to make us visible to one another without being exposed. A rerun was playing. Some old sitcom with canned laughter and big hair. I used to love that show, but tonight I couldn't follow the jokes. Janine didn't try either. We just watched, sharing silence like it was a warm blanket. Every now and then, I heard her shift, in her chair or sigh quietly. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged to be filled. It was the kind that says, "I see you. I'm here." Sometimes that's all a person needs. I asked her about her grandmother. She smiled and said she used to knit scarves even when nobody asked for them. She say cold always come, so better be ready. We laughed gently at that. I pictured her, probably small like me, with strong hands and a soft heart. Janine reached into her pocket and pulled out a wrapped peppermint. She always give one after dinner, she said, not for breath, for comfort. She placed it on my tray and slid it over with 2 fingers. I picked it up and crinkled the wrapper between my fingers for a moment before tucking it into the sleeve of my cardigan. I didn't eat it that night. I just needed to know it was there. When she stood to leave, she didn't rush. She gathered her wrapper, patted her knees like she was making sure she still existed, and turned toward the door. Just before she stepped out, she looked back. "You still someone, Miss Eileen," she said quietly. Then she smiled and closed the door. That one sentence sat with me longer than most conversations ever have. Not you are loved, or I'll be back. Just, you are still someone. And somehow, it was more than enough. I lay in bed with the peppermint still tucked into my sleeve, the taste of tuna still lingering on my tongue, and that sentence replaying in my mind. The room was quiet again, but not empty. Something had shifted. No, that night didn't change everything. It didn't fix the years I felt slowly faded from memory, but it mended a tear I hadn't even realized was open, because sometimes it only takes one gentle moment, one small kindness, to remind you that you're still here, still someone. Was flipping through my Bible that morning. Not reading, not really. Just turning the pages like I do when the loneliness feels too heavy for my lap. The edges were worn soft from the years, smudged in places where prayers had soaked in, and then something fluttered out. At first I thought it was just an old receipt or bookmark, but no, it was one of those little scratch-off tickets. The kind my husband used to buy in batches and tuck into silly places. My coat pocket, the cookie jar, sometimes right between Psalms and Proverbs. He used to say, "You never know when a little luck will come to find you." I held it between my fingers and smiled. It was faded, creased, but untouched. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years, but the memory of it came rushing back just the same. There was a dime on the windowsill. I'd kept it from our trip to the Smokies, silver and ordinary, but it felt special because it was ours. I picked it up and rubbed the edge across the card, slowly. No rush, no real expectations, just a little curiosity. Maybe a whisper of hope, too. Silver flakes curled off like delicate snow. The numbers appeared, one after the other. My breath caught somewhere in my chest before my mind caught up. The numbers matched. I blinked. Once. Twice. I checked again. And again. $17 million. 17 million. I covered my mouth with my hand, the dime still warm from my fingers. My heart didn't race, it just thudded, slow and steady, like it was trying to believe it too. The sunlight shifted on the floor. I felt noticed, not by the world, by something deeper. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just sat there in my chair with the ticket in my lap and the light catching dust motes in the air like they were dancing just for me. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about what it meant. I'd been overlooked for so long, it felt like the world had gone quiet around me. But now, something had looked back. Something had reached out and placed a miracle in my palm, soft and unexpected. I whispered his name. Just once. Like maybe, wherever he was, he'd laugh and say, "Told you it was worth scratching, didn't I?" I could hear his voice in my memory, just as plain as the floor beneath my feet. He'd be standing there with one sock rolled halfway off, smirking like he'd planned it all along. "Shoulda listened to me, Eileen," he'd say, and I would've. Rolled my eyes, then baked a cake just because. My eyes welled up, but I didn't let the tears fall. Instead, I smiled. A real one. Not the polite kind I'd worn for months, but one that made the corners of my mouth ache from how long it had been. I looked down at the ticket in my lap and laid my hand gently over it. I didn't rush to tell anyone. That moment was mine. Just mine. Later, I pulled a sticky note from my drawer, the kind they use here to remind me when the podiatrist's coming or when to refill my meds. I picked up a pen and, in the top corner, I wrote his name. Just his first name. In my old handwriting, I pressed the note beside the ticket and folded them together. He would have wanted to be part of this moment, so I made sure he was. He called the next day. A man from the lottery office, or maybe the bank. I don't remember. Exactly. His voice was calm, polite. No rush, no doubt in his tone. Just a quiet kind of certainty. Is this Eileen Harper? It had been a long time since someone said my name like it still mattered. Yes, I said, straightening in my chair, without even meaning to. Well, ma'am, he said gently, it looks like you're going to need to come in. Ma'am, not sweetie or hun. Not a pat on the head or a smile that says you don't understand. Just ma'am. With respect. It surprised me how much that simple word made me sit up a little taller. Like someone had remembered I was once a woman who ran a household, paid bills, planned holidays, and now somehow I was back at the table. He asked me a question I hadn't heard in years. What would you like to do with the money, Mrs. Harper? I didn't answer right away. The line went quiet, but he didn't push. He waited. And so I sat there, looking out my window at the same tree I'd seen for over a year now, branches bare, wind brushing past the pane. I thought about all the times I'd made decisions for other people. What to cook, what to buy, what to give. And now someone was asking what I wanted, just me. I'm not sure yet, I said softly. But inside something shifted. It was like hearing a door creak open, in a room I thought had been locked forever. That night, I dreamed of a little yellow house with a porch swing. Nothing grand. Just space. There were curtains that smelled like fresh linen, a kitchen with sunlight that hit the same way it used to in my old home, and a garden with too many tomatoes, because I never could plant just a few. In the dream, I was barefoot, humming, pulling a pie from the oven. No one needed anything from me. But I was still full of something I hadn't felt in a long time, joy without duty. Peace without silence. When I woke up, I held the dream close, like a folded letter from someone who still remembered me. I thought about what people buy when they win. Cars, cruises, diamonds. But none of it tempted me. I didn't want more things. Wanted mornings that belonged to me, a house that smelled like cinnamon again. Time that wasn't borrowed from shift schedules or visiting hours. I wanted to decide what the day looked like, even if it was just drinking tea on a porch swing and watching the wind move the leaves around. Maybe that doesn't sound like much to some folks, but after years of having no say at all, it felt like everything. When I went to the bank, the room was clean, quiet, and modern. Big windows, white walls, soft music playing overhead. The man who met me wore a navy tie and smiled without making me feel small. He walked me through the forms, gently, patiently. When it came time to sign, he slid the papers across the table and handed me a pen. I looked at that line, signature, and my name was waiting just above it. I wrote it slowly. Eileen Harper. Neatly. Completely. It looked stronger than I remembered. I capped the pen and looked up. The banker nodded once. No fuss, just acknowledgement. And in that moment, I wasn't a resident or a case number or a she's sweet but forgetful. I was a woman, a full one, a whole one. The doors swished open as I left the bank, and the breeze hit my face like a blessing. I didn't feel rich. I felt returned. Like I had found a version of myself I didn't realize I'd lost. The one who used to write grocery lists in cursive, who planned holidays down to the centerpiece, who used to matter in quiet, everyday ways. I didn't need applause. I just needed this space, this breath, this moment where I remembered, I'm still me. He knocked like he wasn't sure if he should. I heard the sound through the front window. Soft, hesitant, not the kind of knock that says I'm home, but the kind that asks, am I still allowed in? I opened the door slowly. There he stood, my son, holding a bouquet of tulips, yellow ones, my favorite. His eyes scanned the doorway, then me. He looked older than I remembered. Not by years, but by the guilt that hung around his shoulders like a coat he couldn't take off. "Hi, Mama," he said, voice quiet. "You look good." I smiled gently. "You remembered where I live." He laughed nervously and held out the flowers. "These are for you. I was in the neighborhood." He wasn't. We both knew it, but I stepped aside, and he walked in, tulips trembling just slightly in his hands. He sat on the couch, one leg bouncing, eyes not quite meeting mine. "It's been a crazy year," he started, as if that explained everything. I nodded, offering nothing. "I meant to call on your birthday," he added. I didn't answer right away. Just let the silence fill the space between us like thick syrup. "I know," I said finally. He looked relieved, like my words were a bridge. But I wasn't building one. Not yet. I just wanted him to sit in the stillness, to feel the shape of what was missing. Because sometimes love isn't fixed. It's in the knowing. "I baked earlier today," I said, standing slowly. "Blueberry pie. Thought I'd make one like I used to." He blinked. "You baked?" I nodded. "Some things come back quicker than you'd expect." I brought him a slice on a small china plate and set it on the coffee table in front of him. No fanfare, no speech. He stared at it for a long second, then picked up the fork. "It smells just like it used to," he murmured. I sat down across from him. "That's the cinnamon. You always liked it heavily." He took a bite, chewed, slowly, and for a moment, his eyes softened, like they did when he was 10, and scraped his knee, and I made him pancakes. He didn't say thank you, but he didn't have to. He looked around the room, taking in the photos on the mantel, the fresh flowers. In a jar, the books stacked by the window. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "I have." He looked down. "I should have called more. Should have." I held up a hand. "You don't have to list it." "But I want to." "That's for you, not for me," I said gently. He looked like he might cry, but he didn't. Just stared, down at his hands, now empty of tulips, now full of regret. I didn't need him to apologize. What I needed was already here. And I realized at that moment, I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his sorrow. I had my pie, my porch, my quiet joy. I was already whole. When he stood to leave, he hugged me. It was brief, unsure. His arms went around me loosely, like he wasn't sure how long he'd be allowed to hold on. I held him gently, no tighter than I needed to. "I'm glad you came," I whispered. He nodded, still not quite meeting my eyes. "Me too." And then he was gone. The door clicked softly behind him. I stood there for a moment, hands still resting on the knob, not waiting for him to come back, just standing in the stillness of what had already passed, and I felt peace. Not from what was said, but from what I no longer needed to hear. I almost said no. When my daughter called and invited me for dinner, part of me braced for it to be out, of guilt. But her voice didn't have that edge. It sounded sincere, like she meant it. Like maybe this wasn't just a makeup meal, but something real. I didn't dress fancy, just wore the soft blue blouse I always liked, the one with the pearl buttons I can still fasten myself. I combed my hair slowly and looked at myself in the mirror, steadying my breath. And when I walked through her front door, I smelled rosemary and garlic. There were voices in the kitchen, children's laughter tumbling out from the living room, and at the table. There was a chair waiting for me, a real one, pulled out, with a cloth napkin folded beside the plate. Not a folding chair, not the end of the couch. A place. Mine. We sat around the table, hands passing dishes, stories flowing like gravy. At first, I was quiet, just listening. Then one of the grandkids, Emily, I think, asked, "Grandma, what was Daddy like when he was little?" I smiled, and something opened up. I told them about the time he tried to jump off the garage roof with a cape made from my curtains. They laughed, all of them, even him, and no one interrupted. No one checked their phone or glanced away or changed the subject. They let me finish. I hadn't felt that in so long, that warmth of being heard. I didn't need applause, I just needed space. And suddenly, I had it. The candles flickered softly. As we ate, their light danced across the walls, making everything feel softer, slower, like the house itself had settled into something more forgiving. Someone passed me the rolls and gently touched my shoulder in the process. Just a small thing. But it meant more than I could say. That's the thing about gestures. When you've gone long enough without them, even the lightest ones feel like rain after drought. I caught my daughter's gaze across the table. She smiled, not just at me, but for me, and for once, I didn't look away. After dinner, I brought out the sweet potato pie I'd made. It was an old recipe, handwritten, smudged from years of cinnamon and sticky fingers. One of the kids took a bite and said, "This tastes like fall." Another asked, "Can you teach me how to make it?" And just like that, I was in the moment again, not just visiting, not just sitting politely, belonging. They weren't just eating the pie. They were reaching for the story behind it, and I was ready to give it. When I spoke, they leaned in. It wasn't that I had some grand tale to share, just little things. The first time I baked that pie in a kitchen so small, I had to cool it on the windowsill. The way your fingers stick to the crust if you don't flour them just right. And they listened. Not just to the words, but to the pauses, too. That's how. You know someone's really hearing you when they don't rush to fill the silence. I let that silence stretch, just a little, because it felt good to take up space again. As the night settled and coats were grabbed and dishes were rinsed, my daughter walked me to the car. "You okay, Mama?" she asked, slipping her arm around mine. I nodded. "Better than okay?" She kissed my cheek, and as I sat in the passenger seat, I realized something. I wasn't carrying the ache home with me tonight. It had been replaced with something smaller, quieter, but deeper. Not perfect peace, but a sense of place. And that was enough. The first thing I did with the money was simple. I bought a little house, not big, not grand. Just one that smelled like wood polish and possibility. It had yellow siding, a creaky porch swing, and a kitchen that caught the morning light the way my old one used to. That first evening, I baked something, just to see if I still could. Apple, slices, brown sugar, cinnamon. The whole place filled with the scent of warmth. It wrapped around me like a memory that hadn't faded yet. I opened the windows and let the breeze carry it through the house, like a quiet, "I'm here" to the walls. There was no one to impress. No one to feed but me. And that, in its own quiet way, felt like freedom. I used some of the money for the town library, a quiet room in the back with a circle of chairs, a reading lamp, and a shelf full of books by women who were never given microphones. I didn't put my name on anything. I didn't need the credit, but every so often I'd pass by and peek through the window, and I'd see someone sitting in there, reading out loud to no one in particular, just because the words deserved to be heard. That room mattered, and so did the people inside it. I gave out scholarships too, to girls who reminded me of myself, too quiet in rooms that rewarded loud voices. Girls who were good at noticing, at remembering small things, who always held their pencils like they might run out of paper before they ran out of story. Each envelope I signed felt like planting something, and every thank you letter I got back made me smile, not because they needed me, but because I got to remind them they were worth being seen. These days, my mornings are my own. I wake up when the light hits the curtains, not when someone knocks with a clipboard. I drink my tea how I like it, steeped long with honey and a splash of cream. Sometimes I sit by the window and write in a notebook. Nothing fancy, just little things I want to remember, like how soft the porch swing creaks, or how the air smells before rain, or how good it feels to not be waiting for someone else's permission to enjoy my life. On my birthday, I still baked a cake, just a small one, chocolate with vanilla icing. I lit one candle, and I didn't wish for anyone to show up. I didn't wait for the phone to ring. I just sat there, took a bite, and smiled. Because I remembered me. That was enough. I've come to believe something. True, life doesn't always hand you what you deserve. Sometimes it hands you silence. Sometimes it hands you loss. But sometimes, if you're patient, it hands you space. Space to rebuild, space to breathe, and maybe space to begin again. If my story touched your heart, I kindly ask you to like this video and subscribe. I'll be here every day sharing more stories just for you. Thank you, my dear.